Hello, I'm Aelith. My sister once screamed at me across a brunch table, "I quit my job. You'll support my husband and I while I go find myself." My mother didn't flinch. She just looked at me and said, "If you refuse, don't dream of coming this Christmas." And I smiled. That night, my phone lit up with 52 missed calls, but none of them asked why I was done. What they didn't know was, I'd already uncovered the studio registered in my name, the house deed hidden in a folder, the photo they cropped me out of, on purpose. What kind of family calls you selfish after you've paid every bill in silence? And what happens when the one who never speaks finally answers back? I arrived 10 minutes early, like I always do. The cafe was warm, filled with the low hum of weekend chatter, clinking cutlery, and the smell of cinnamon syrup over pancakes. Outside, the leaves were crisp and brilliant. Minneapolis always knew how to show off in early October. Inside, though, the air was thick with something else entirely: tension, that kind that sticks to the back of your neck before anything's even been said. I sat at the corner table, the one near the window. Good light, quick exit. I ordered black coffee and water for everyone else. My sister Valora was always late, and my mother Delora always acted like that was charming. The waitress brought the drinks just as they walked in. Valora first, dressed like she was headed to a photo shoot, not a family brunch. Wide-brimmed hat, oversized sunglasses, sweater falling off one shoulder like it was trying to make an exit, too. Delora followed behind her, checking her phone with one hand, adjusting her coat with the other. Neither made eye contact. Valora air-kissed my cheek and slid into the seat across from me like she was starring in her own life. Delora sat next to her, immediately grabbing the menu, though she always ordered the same thing. No one asked how I'd been. I didn't expect them to. "Sorry we're late," Valora sang, waving to the waitress like she owned the place. Traffic was soul-killing. She laughed at her own exaggeration. Denton, her husband, wasn't there, probably meditating on alignment or whatever he called sleeping until noon. We ordered. I sipped my coffee. Delora tapped her spoon against her glass for no reason at all. And then, without warning, mid-bite of toast, Valora dropped it. "I quit my job," she said, flipping her napkin into her lap like it was a celebration. "You'll support my husband and me while I go find myself." Silence. Even the couple at the next table turned their heads. Forks stopped moving. My coffee caught in my throat, and I coughed once, hard. Valora didn't flinch. She was used to commanding attention. It wasn't the words, really. It was the assumption. She wasn't asking. She was informing, like a manager assigning a task to a junior employee. I looked at her, then at Delora. My mother didn't look shocked. She looked prepared, as if they'd rehearsed this in the car on the way over. "Valora," I said slowly, "what do you mean by support?" She smiled. Sweet. Synthetic. "You make good money, Aelith. You're stable. You don't have a family to support. It just makes sense." Delora nodded, still not looking at me. "You know how much she's been struggling with energy imbalances. She needs time to heal." "She's been to Bali twice," I said flatly. "Personal growth isn't linear," Valora replied, like she was quoting a podcast. "Healing takes detours." I wanted to laugh, or scream, or flip the table, but I didn't. Instead, I inhaled through my nose, exhaled slowly, and tried to find any rational foothold in a conversation that had clearly fallen off the map of reality. "No one ran this by me," I said. "We're running it by you now," Valora said, as if I was the one being unreasonable. Then came the moment. Delora set her fork down, deliberately, softly. Her eyes finally met mine, cold, steady, calculated. "If you refuse," she said, her voice calm and clear, "don't dream of coming this Christmas." There it was. Not a request, not a question. A threat, packaged in holiday cheer. And still, no yelling, no dramatics. Just that passive-aggressive warfare that mothers like mine have mastered over a lifetime. Weaponized guilt. Familial obligation repackaged as blackmail. I didn't say anything. My hands were steady, even if my stomach was churning. I looked at Valora, smug, victorious. I looked at Delora, immovable. Then I looked down at the check the waitress had just placed at the table. Of course, it had already been assumed I'd cover it. I picked it up, placed my card inside, and smiled. Not warmly, not politely, the kind of smile that doesn't touch your eyes, the kind that says, "Message received." "I'll get this one," I said, standing up. Valora blinked. Delora's lips tightened. "Thanks, sis," Valora chirped, not a trace of irony. I didn't reply. I signed the receipt, left a 25% tip, and walked out. The wind outside felt sharper than when I'd arrived, or maybe I was just seeing clearly for the first time in a while. Back home, I didn't take off my coat. I sat on the edge of my couch, staring at the silence. The kind of silence that hums loud in your ears when something seismic has shifted. My phone was face down on the coffee table. I let it stay there. When I finally picked it up, just before bed, the screen lit up with a list of calls. 52 missed. Valora, Delora, Denton, even cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Not one voicemail, just pressure. Digital, relentless, familiar. I put the phone back down, turned it off completely. I'd already heard everything I needed to hear. The glow of my phone lit up the dark room, each missed call rolling in like a tide I'd never asked for. I sat there, cross-legged on the couch, the blanket from earlier still wrapped around my shoulders. My apartment was quiet, except for the subtle hum of the refrigerator and the creaks of old wood settling into the night. It wasn't fear that kept me still. It was realization, slow and sharp, like ice forming beneath my skin. I put the phone down without unlocking it, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and leaned against the counter, watching my reflection in the microwave door. Same eyes, same face. But everything behind them was shifting. When I returned to the couch, I turned the phone back on just to check the time. That's when the screen lit up again. Not with another missed call, but a message. It was from Denton. "Let's be real. You're just the wallet. Don't pretend this is about anything else. No punctuation, no hello, no thanks. Just a flat statement, like I was a checking account with legs." I stared at the words. I should have felt shock, maybe fury, but all I felt was cold clarity. It didn't surprise me. Not really. It was just confirmation of what I had been pretending not to know. I didn't respond. There was nothing worth saying. Instead, I curled up on the couch, phone in hand, and opened up the app I shouldn't have opened. Instagram. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just a mindless scroll, a need to distract my brain before bed. And then I saw it. Rowan? My old college roommate, the one who used to say she admired how grounded I was. She had reposted Valora's latest video clip. The caption read, "So proud of you for choosing yourself. Real strength is messy." Underneath were dozens of hearts. Encouraging comments from people who knew nothing but were ready to cheer anyway. In the video, Valora sat on her velvet couch, voice low, eyes wide with manufactured vulnerability. "My journey's been hard. Not everyone understands what it takes to walk away from the structures that suffocate you." Structures that suffocate. Was I the structure? She hadn't mentioned my name. Of course not. That would have required courage. But the implication was loud enough. I scrolled past the clip before I could throw my phone. I knew Rowan would see that I'd viewed it. I didn't care. That's when I started remembering. Not out of nostalgia, but out of defense. Because when you're being erased, you start building an archive. There was the year Valora got a brand new phone because Delora said, she needs to feel safe out there. I had been saving tips from bussing tables to buy a refurbished laptop no one else wanted. The time Valora cried after a C on her art project and got a weekend spa retreat for emotional support. I'd gotten straight A's and a good job sticky note. "Valora's our dreamer," my mom used to say at every family dinner. "And Alith's our stable one," she'd add like I was the backup generator to my sister's glittering light show. But I wasn't stable. I was stuck. Stuck covering phone plans, car insurance, pet emergencies. Stuck being responsible because no one else would. They didn't love me for who I was. They loved me for what I could absorb. The sadness didn't come all at once. It seeped in slowly, the way dusk becomes night. I let it wash over me, not fighting it, not justifying any of it. I grabbed my phone again, opened the Notes app, and typed a single line. I will never pay to be invisible again. Then I stared at that sentence. Read it twice. A third time. It felt like the beginning of something I couldn't yet name. Not revenge, not even justice. Just reclamation. A boundary drawn in pixels. The hours passed. I didn't sleep. I didn't want to. Sometime around 2 in the morning, I stood up, turned on the light in the hallway, and walked over to the cabinet where I kept the family photos. I hadn't opened that drawer in years. At the top of the stack was a Christmas photo from when Dad was still alive. We were all sitting by the tree, me in the middle, Valora leaning on me, smiling like she knew the camera loved her more. My dad's arm was around me. I touched the edge of the frame, my fingers tracing the grain. And that's when I noticed something else. The wallpaper in the background. That tree wasn't at their house. It was at mine. That was my apartment. The year they had begged to come over because the heat was out at Delora's place, and I'd said yes. I had cooked the entire meal, bought the gifts, paid the utilities. And yet, when that picture had been posted, the caption had read, "Christmas at Mom's." A family tradition. A tradition. I turned the photo face down, sat back down on the couch, opened the group chat. My thumb hovered over the remove from group option. It would have been easy. 2 taps. But just as I was about to do it, I stopped. Because suddenly, I realized something that made my stomach tighten more than that message from Denton. They weren't cutting me out. They were rewriting me. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I must have dozed off sometime around 4, because when I woke up, the light slipping through the blinds had shifted from street lamp orange to that soft, overcast gray of an early Minneapolis morning. I stayed in bed a few extra minutes, letting the quiet buzz of my apartment hold me. No missed calls, no new messages, just stillness. The air was colder than usual. I grabbed the oversized cardigan I kept draped over the back of my desk chair and wrapped it around me as I walked barefoot into the kitchen. The kettle clicked on automatically, one of the few routines I'd programmed for myself that still worked without fail. With a mug of tea in hand, I stood at the kitchen counter, staring at the closed laptop from the night before. It almost felt like it was watching me back. And maybe it was. Maybe all the versions of myself that had been edited out were sitting there, waiting for me to dig them up. I took a sip, then walked to the living room shelf and pulled down a worn sketchbook. The edges were frayed. A few coffee stains dotted the front cover from nights long past when ideas came faster than caution. I flipped through it slowly until I reached the one I had drawn the summer before senior year. The dream that had once felt possible. Gray pages. A bookstore. My bookstore. It was a blend of brick and warmth, every corner designed for comfort. A reading nook by the front window, low shelves stocked with books I loved, a small cafe counter tucked in the back for hot chocolate and lemon cake. The blueprints were rough, but even now, they held a kind of tenderness, an architecture of hope. I'd shown it to my parents once. Delora had glanced at the drawings and said, "Bookstores are dying, Aelith. It's too risky. Stick to something stable." My father had said nothing. He rarely challenged her when it came to practicality. I had folded the sketch, tucked it into this book, and buried it under more reasonable dreams. Until Valora's candle studio popped up 2 years later. The same layout, the same cozy vibe, just a different name, the Wellness Nook. Everyone praised her for being visionary. No one remembered where the vision came from. I stared at the page in front of me, then grabbed my phone and snapped a photo of the blueprint. I renamed the file, Proofs Row 1. Then I opened my laptop and created a new cloud folder, titled it, The Truth They Hid, not for revenge, not for exposure, just for me. So I'd never forget again. The tea had gone cold, but I didn't care. I stood up and moved to the hall closet. I hadn't opened that box in years. The one marked holiday stuff in my father's handwriting. It had sat there through 2 moves, untouched. Now, I tugged it down and placed it on the coffee table. When I lifted the lid, the smell hit me first. Pine. Dust. something faintly sweet, maybe cinnamon? It smelled like December. I dug through carefully, pulling out ornaments wrapped in old newspaper. A ceramic bell from second grade, a knit reindeer from a craft fair in Duluth. But the one I was looking for, the one that mattered most, wasn't there. The star, the one Dad and I had made together when I was 12. We'd cut it from gold foil, glued tiny pieces of broken CDs to it so it would sparkle under the lights. He'd called it our anchor in snow. I searched the entire box twice. It wasn't there. And then I remembered. Last year, Delora had hosted a holiday shoot in Valora's studio. She'd said the old tree I kept took up too much space and didn't match the aesthetic. She'd given it away without asking. "It's just stuff," she had told me. "Valora needs the room to create. Just stuff. A memory, discarded like a broken lamp." I sat back on the couch and stared at the half-emptied box. My hands were still in my lap, but my heart felt like it was clenching itself into a fist. This wasn't just about a tree, or a bookstore, or a group chat. This was a pattern, a design, a lifetime of being overwritten. My childhood bedroom had become the family storage unit. My laptop, borrowed just for a weekend project, was never returned. My suggestions turned into someone else's achievements. My voice reduced to background noise at best, erased at worst. It was never outright theft. That would have been too easy to name. It was rebranding, reinvention, reassignment of credit, dressed in family smiles and polite applause. I walked to my bookshelf, pulled out the only photo album I still had from college, and slid a few pages aside until I found a faded print of me sitting on the floor of that bookstore sketch, scribbling new layout options. I scanned it, saved it next to the blueprint. There. That part of me was real again. "They don't want me gone," I whispered. "They just want me invisible." I stood up, heart racing but strangely steady, and looked at myself in the hallway mirror. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked older, yes, but not weaker, not broken. She looked like someone who'd been quiet for too long, and was done being polite about it. I didn't slam the laptop closed when I returned to the couch. I placed it down gently, like it was holding something sacred, because it was. The truth didn't need to scream, it just needed to be kept. And that one unfinished sentence, "I'm not coming," was the first line of a boundary I didn't need permission to draw. I drove home from my mother's house in silence, the radio off, both windows down just enough to let the cool air slice through the car and settle over me like a reality check. It had been 2 weeks since the brunch from hell, and yet the ripple effect continued like clockwork. I had avoided every group text thread, dodged every call, and pretended I didn't see the passive-aggressive Instagram captions Valora kept posting about spiritual recentering. But this night, the anniversary dinner, was something else entirely. Delora had asked me, or rather assumed I would help set up the backyard for the party. I'd arrived early with folding chairs in my trunk because I knew no one else would bring them. The tent guy was late, the catering staff had gotten the order wrong, and the playlist was stuck on some pre-made Spotify list titled Hopeful Elegance. But none of that bothered me. What got to me was the seat. I didn't expect a throne. I didn't need a spotlight. But when I walked under the white tent and saw my name card placed at the far end, next to the portable restroom, I didn't even blink. There it was, the metaphor in physical form. Every other seat was neatly arranged around the long wooden table, covered in a white linen runner, pumpkins, candles, little framed photos of my parents when they were young. Valora's place card had a flower taped to it. Mine had a wine ring stain. I sat down anyway. What else was I supposed to do? Cause a scene. That's Valora's lane. I just wanted to make it through the night without becoming an anecdote. Within 15 minutes, people started arriving. Cousins, old neighbors, church friends, the ones who used to say things like, "You're so lucky to have a sister like Valora, she lights up a room." No one said, "You're so lucky to have a sister like Aelith, she shows up with the chairs." Delora floated from guest to guest, smiling like it was her wedding. "She would have been proud," people kept saying, meaning my dad. But it felt less like tribute and more like branding. At one point, the wine ran out. Someone shouted, "Does anyone know where the backup bottles are?" Without thinking, I got up and went to the cooler, brought out the wine, refilled the buckets, wiped down a spill. When I returned to my seat, it was occupied. "She'll be fine," someone said, waving me off. "There's a stool over there." I sat on the stool. Then came the photo moment. You know the one. Everyone's gathered at the main table, raised glasses, photographer waiting for that perfect golden hour glow. I watched as Valora pulled people in closer, adjusted someone's scarf, smoothed the runner. No one called for me. Not once. I was 5 feet away, but they could have been in another state. I looked around. Someone motioned toward the back. "Aelith, could you grab more ice?" "Sorry, we're out." Of course. I went to the garage fridge, grabbed 2 bags of ice, and walked them over without comment. My hands were red from the cold. I poured them into the metal tubs and stepped back just as the camera flashed. I didn't ask to be in the photo. What would have been the point? Later, as the sun dipped and the string lights glowed like forced nostalgia, Valora made her grand entrance. She'd been delayed at the spa, which apparently translated to arriving in a white silk jumpsuit and fresh curls. People clapped. Someone toasted. I sipped water. She spotted me, sitting by the restroom, still holding my cup, and smiled like I was the help. That smile. The same one she used on waiters and store clerks and Uber drivers she'd rated 3 stars. I excused myself, walked to the side of the house, and sat on the steps near the garden hose. I pulled out my phone and opened the email I'd written but never sent. Subject: for the studio launch. Body: thank you for letting me be a part of your journey. Your growth has cost me more than I ever planned to give, but I gave it anyway. Because family, I hope someday you'll remember that. I never got the chance to read it at her event. She'd asked me to record it so her assistant could cue it up during the opening celebration of the Wellness Nook. I had dressed up, sat quietly in the front row, clapped when told. But when the time came, my video didn't play. Valora said they had tech issues, then went on to thank everyone who's ever supported me emotionally and energetically. The clip that played instead was a montage of her lighting candles, hiking barefoot, sipping tea by a window, set to soft piano music and overlaid with quotes about rebirth. My name didn't appear once. Now, sitting behind Delora's hydrangeas, I deleted the email. It didn't matter anymore. As the night wound down, guests began hugging their goodbyes. I re-entered the tent to grab my coat and keys. Valora, now holding a flute of champagne, swayed past me. "You look tired," she said. "I'm fine." She raised her glass, smug. "Next time you want to be thanked, maybe don't make it a condition of love." I took a breath, just one, then said evenly, "Next time you want my money, you can list me on the brochure." She laughed. Of course she did. "Oh my God, are you still upset about that? Don't be transactional, Aelith." "It's gross." She walked away before I could respond. Delora appeared a moment later, rubbing her hands together for warmth. "Aelith, don't forget, Thanksgiving planning is at my place next week. Bring your laptop again, okay?" I turned to her and said it. "I'm not coming." She blinked, smile freezing in place. "What?" "I'm not coming to the planning meeting." I didn't wait for her reaction. I walked out of the tent, keys already in hand, and headed for my car. Behind me, the laughter continued. But for once, I wasn't part of the script. By the time I got home that night, the streetlights had already taken over for the sun. The air was dry, still holding on to the warmth of the afternoon, but I could feel the edge of November trying to creep in through the seams of my jacket. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door, kicked off my flats, and walked straight to the kitchen to pour a glass of water I didn't even finish. The taste of the night clung to me more than the air did. I replayed that sentence, "I'm not coming," over and over in my head. It echoed like it had more weight than it should have. Maybe because it was the first thing I'd said in years that didn't come with an apology behind it. 3 days later, I found out they'd held a holiday planning meeting at Delora's house, without me. Not a word in the group chat. No reminder, no calendar invite, nothing. But somehow, magically, my debit card still managed to get used to pay for the deposit on a catering order. The notification came through while I was organizing shipping reports at work. I checked the amount, then the name of the vendor, and I knew exactly what it was for. I sat back in my office chair and stared at the screen, not sure if I wanted to scream or laugh. When I called Delora, her voice was perfectly pleasant. "Oh, honey, we didn't want to bother you. You've been so busy and you're already so good with numbers. We just assumed you'd want it handled. You used my account." "Well, we used the joint family card which you set up, remember? I thought it was still okay." I didn't respond right away. Then I asked, "Who's the we in that sentence?" She hesitated. "Well, Valora had the idea to go with full service this year, to make it easier on everyone." Of course, Valora had the idea. I had the bill. "And you didn't think to ask me?" "We were protecting your peace." That was the phrase she used, protecting my peace, by violating my privacy. Again, I didn't argue, I just hung up. Later that evening, I drove over to drop off some receipts Delora had asked me to bring weeks ago. I parked in front of the house and sat in the car longer than I needed to. The lights were on, and I could hear laughter from inside. That sort of forced, elevated tone people use when they're trying too hard to prove something's fun. When I walked in, no one looked surprised to see me. That bothered me more than if they had. Valora was seated at the head of the table, sipping from a glass of white wine like she was hosting a TED Talk. Delora was gathering up papers, lists, and printed out menus. "Oh good, you're just in time to see the final plan," Delora said, smiling like nothing had happened. I stood still. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "You planned everything without me." Valora didn't even look up. "Not everything. We left room for your famous spreadsheet." A few people chuckled. I didn't. Then I saw it, a framed photo sitting on the hallway shelf. It was from last Thanksgiving. I remembered that day. I had taken off work early, done the shopping, even made the centerpiece. I'd been in the photo. I remembered standing next to the fireplace, my hand resting on the back of Dad's old armchair. But in this framed version, I was gone. Cropped out. The edges weren't even smooth. It was a lazy edit. I picked it up. Held it toward Delora. "I was in this." She glanced over and waved a hand. "Oh, sweetheart. The frame was too small. Don't take it personally." I felt something in me click. Not crack, not break. Click. Like a key sliding into the lock of a door I hadn't opened in years. I placed the photo back down, face down this time, and turned back to the table. "I'm tired of being useful and invisible," I said. Delora smiled like I was a toddler having a tantrum in public. "Help is help, Aelith. Don't poison it by asking for credit." Valora sipped her wine. "That's the thing about generosity," she added. "It only counts if you don't bring it up later." They didn't see it, what they were doing. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. Maybe it was easier to keep me quiet if they pretended my silence was sainthood. I looked at both of them, steady, calm, no yelling, no drama. "If you treat me like a support system, not a daughter, then expect a system shutdown." Delora stood straighter. "Don't threaten your family." "It's not a threat," I said. "It's a settings update." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't storm out. I just walked to the table, picked up the catering receipt, and folded it once before slipping it into my purse. Then I turned, walked to the door, and let it close behind me without a word. My fork was still on the plate. I hadn't taken a single bite. I got into the car, took a breath, and before starting the engine, I glanced at my phone. One notification. Suspicious login attempt on shared family account. I stared at the message. Then I opened the app and changed every password, logged out every device, removed every name. By the time the envelope hit my kitchen counter, I already knew who sent it. No return address. Handwritten. No message inside, just a printout of my speech from Valora's studio launch, the one they'd promised would be played. The one I had written from a place of love, if not hope. The one that never made it to the screen. Across the top of the page, in thick red marker, someone had scribbled one word: deleted. I stared at it. Not long, not shocked, just long enough to absorb the truth. They weren't just trying to make me quiet, they wanted me erased. I folded the paper back into the envelope, slid it under the stack of utility bills on my dining table, and poured myself a cup of coffee. Not because I needed it, but because I needed the ritual. Something warm, something that reminded me I was alive and paying attention. Later that afternoon, I opened the small lockbox tucked beneath the linen closet. Inside, where I had kept every notarized document from my father's estate, was a sealed envelope marked Property Title, 421 North Sheridan. That was the address of the house Delora still lived in. I hadn't thought much about it when I first moved out. I just assumed the paperwork had transferred back to her after Dad passed, but the folder said otherwise. When I opened the documents, the words were crystal clear. Full ownership rights of 421 North Sheridan, Minneapolis, MN, passed to Aelith Gray upon the passing of Harland Gray. I read it again and again. Delora had never told me. She'd been living in that house for 4 years, filing taxes on it, claiming utility reimbursements from her church's volunteer housing fund, and it was legally mine. I closed the folder and set it aside. The next morning, I received 2 messages, 1 email, 1 letter in the mailbox, from the IRS. Both were flagged urgent. Apparently, a recent audit had flagged my tax ID number in a suspicious business registration. The filing claimed the address of Valora's studio. The business name? Wellness Resilience Collective. Registered under my social security number. I didn't need to guess who filed it. I didn't respond to the IRS right away. Instead, I called Jennifer, the accountant who handled our family's taxes a few years back. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Jennifer, I need your help. Quietly." Within an hour, she'd confirmed everything. My information had been used without my consent. Financial documents had been updated by someone who had my old logins. She walked me through freezing my credit, filing a fraud report, and locking down every financial tie I had left to the Gray family. After I got off the call, I made a list. Utilities, streaming services, insurance policies, emergency contacts, everything, every shared account, joint plan, login, and automated payment I had ever allowed to keep the peace. I canceled them all. I didn't call to warn anyone. I didn't send an email. No explanations, no fight, just clicks. Delora and Valora were both removed from the gas and electric accounts. Water bill, transferred. Internet, cut off by midnight. I sent a cease and desist letter through a legal aid firm I'd found online, pro bono for financial abuse cases. It was simple, direct, no insults, no emotion. Just notice that their use of my name, my finances, or my identity in any business, tax filing, or application would result in legal action. And finally, I printed and hand-delivered a formal occupancy review letter to Delora's mailbox, signed, dated, and certified. She had 30 days to provide proof of property tax payment in her own name or vacate the home. I didn't expect it to end quietly. I just needed it to start clearly. The next morning, the group chat exploded. Delora, are you seriously doing this to your own mother? Valora, you've lost your mind. Denton, not one of them asked why. Not one acknowledged what they'd done. I didn't reply. I took screenshots. All of it. When you've been painted as the villain long enough, the least you can do is carry the receipts. No one called. Not to ask if I was okay. Not to apologize. Not even to yell. But I got plenty of emails. One from a shared streaming platform asking to re-verify payment details. Another from the water company noting unexpected service disruption. A final one from a lawyer whose name I didn't recognize, inquiring whether I would be willing to mediate before pursuing court proceedings. I deleted it. Then, for the first time in years, I called my bank and opened a completely new account, under a different institution, different branch, different everything. It wasn't rage, it was insurance. I sat on the floor that evening, back against the couch, laptop in my lap, and typed out a single sentence into the same note I'd been building since this all began. They were never afraid to lose me, just the benefits of having me. Then I closed the laptop and opened my texts, typed one line into the family group thread. Respect is a 2-way subscription. I just hit cancel. I muted the thread. An hour later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I didn't pick up. The voicemail transcription read, "You're being dramatic. This isn't how families handle things." I smiled. No, this wasn't how they handled things, but it's how I was going to. By dawn the next day, the podcast had dropped. I hadn't subscribed. I didn't follow Valora's public pages anymore. But it didn't matter. The link found its way into my inbox through 4 separate forwarded messages, 3 anonymous DMs, and a client at work who said, "Isn't this your sister?" With that nervous half-laugh people give when they know they're opening a wound, Valora titled the episode, "Unfiltered Healing, When Family Turns Toxic." The cover image was a soft focus shot of her sitting cross-legged, draped in beige cashmere, hands folded like a saint preparing to be misunderstood. I clicked play. "My healing journey," she began, "has been marked by loss, not just material, but spiritual. You expect betrayal from strangers, but when it comes from someone who shares your blood—" She paused, long enough for the emotion to sound real. "It fractures something inside you." She never said my name, but she didn't have to. She talked about a certain family member who controlled the money, about being spiritually suffocated by obligations disguised as generosity, and then the punchline: I was financially abused, silenced by someone who used their stability to make me feel small. I didn't finish the episode. I didn't need to. By lunchtime, the family group chat had turned into a courtroom. Aunt Lydia chimed in with a long paragraph about how communication is a two-way street. My cousin Beth wrote, "I had no idea you were going through all that, Valora. You're so strong." Someone shared a heart emoji. Another posted a gif of someone lighting a candle. No one texted me directly, except Delora. She sent one message: "Take the podcast down. You're embarrassing the family." I stared at the text, reread it, then typed back, "I didn't post it." That was the only thing I said all day, until the calls started. That night, I silenced my phone, put its screen down on the kitchen counter, and turned on the stove to boil water for tea. I wasn't trying to ignore anyone. I just didn't need to hear voices shouting at a wall I no longer lived behind. By the time I walked back into the kitchen, the screen was glowing like a threat. 16 missed calls, then 32, then 52. Valora, Denton, Delora, even Rowan. The texts shifted in tone as the hours passed. First came the rage. "You're ruining her reputation." "You think you're better than the rest of us?" "What happened to loyalty?" Then guilt. "Don't make me choose between my daughters." "Family doesn't mean exile." "She's hurting more than you know." And then the threats. "You'll regret this." "You're playing with fire." "We know more than you think." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I opened my phone, blocked every number, deleted every shared calendar, revoked access to every shared cloud folder, changed every password from Wi-Fi to Netflix to Google Drive. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up my legal folder, and sent a single BCC email to my attorney. Subject: character smear campaign. Attachments: screenshots from podcast, group chat excerpts, fraudulent filings. No emotion, just facts. I closed the lid and sat still for a moment. The quiet in the room felt earned. I hadn't won, but I wasn't losing anymore. I didn't respond online. I didn't clap back on Instagram or Twitter or whatever corner of the internet Valora's followers had decided to weaponize. Instead, I sent an anonymous tip to the local small business compliance board. Attached: proof of Valora registering a business using my name and social security number. I followed that with a formal complaint to the IRS's identity theft unit. If she wanted to play a public game, she could do so with the government. Later that evening, I opened my podcast app, the one I hadn't used in months. At the top of the page was a notification: Valora Unfiltered has been removed for violating terms of service. Beneath it, the banner image was gone. The beige cashmere saint had disappeared into a 404 error. I stared at the screen for a long moment, not smiling, not angry, just still. Then another notification pinged, this time from Instagram. A message from someone I didn't recognize. "I knew something about her never felt right. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." I didn't answer, not because I didn't appreciate it, but because in that moment, I realized the war wasn't just over her lies. It was over the version of me she'd spent years building for people who never asked to know the real one. And now that version was crumbling. The moment the narrative cracked, I knew the truth had stopped whispering. It had started shouting. The podcast was gone, but its aftershocks had only just begun. That morning, as I scrolled through my emails with a half-sipped cup of coffee balanced on my knee, a headline caught my eye. Wellness studio faces fraud accusations. Local entrepreneur under fire. I clicked before I could talk myself out of it. The article wasn't long. Local paper, small town buzz. But there it was, in print. Screenshots of the business license Valora filed. Under my name. Public records, legal terms, a few vague quotes from anonymous sources who claimed there were discrepancies. No names listed, but everyone local knew who it was. And right below that, a screenshot someone had pulled from her now-deleted podcast episode. The caption read, "When your healing comes at someone else's expense, it's not healing." The internet wasn't forgiving. Not this time. By noon, the story had been shared on Facebook, reposted on Instagram, even stitched into a TikTok where someone did a dramatic reading of Valora's old quotes about vibrations and victimhood over a background of filing documents and jazz music. It would have been funny if it hadn't been so tragic. The meme that caught fire. Find yourself? Start by finding a job. I didn't laugh, not out loud. But there was a release in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Not pride, not vengeance, just relief. The group chat, silent since the day I cut them all off, remained a ghost town. No texts, no emails, just stillness. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was strategic, a wound waiting for someone else to acknowledge first. Until Delora called. The phone lit up as I was folding laundry. I stared at it, thumb hovering. I didn't want to hear it, but I answered anyway. I was ready now. "Aelith," she said, her voice steady, but thinner than usual. "How could you let this happen to your sister?" The words landed like a slap, familiar, expected, wrong. "I didn't let anything happen," I said, folding a shirt. "She did that all by herself." Delora paused, as if recalibrating her next move. "She's hurting. She's lost everything. She lost what she built on lies. That's not my fault." Delora sighed like a martyr. "You've always been so calculated." "I've always been careful," I corrected, "because I had to be. Someone had to be." There was nothing left to say. We both knew it. I ended the call without saying goodbye. That weekend, I attended the community charity dinner I'd promised a friend I'd go to months ago. Small church hall, folding tables with plastic cloths, handwritten name tags. I was there to help serve, not be served. But as I checked in at the registration table, I saw something that made my breath catch. A thank you board. Printed, laminated, filled with names of donors. I scanned it once. My name wasn't on it. Then I saw the sign taped next to it. Special thanks to Aelith Gray. Not Aelith, Aelith. No one would have noticed. No one but me. But I knew what it meant. The mistake wasn't innocent. It was a reminder. I could give all I had, but I'd never be remembered the way I wanted to be. I smiled at the volunteer, walked to the back, and spent the night handing out desserts. Brownies, cookies, slices of dry pumpkin pie. No one said my name wrong there. Most didn't say it at all. I preferred it that way. 2 days later, I stopped by Delora's house for the last time. She opened the door with that same performative softness she always wore when things weren't going her way. "I wasn't expecting you," she said. "I didn't come to fight." She nodded, stepping aside. "Do you want some tea?" "No." I walked through the living room slowly. Everything looked smaller. The couch I grew up on had new pillows. My dad's old chair was gone. In its place was a velvet thing that didn't match anything. Delora followed me in. "You know," she started, "we didn't know how to handle your strength. You've always been so intense." "You didn't handle it," I said, turning to face her. "You buried it." "And then told everyone I liked the dirt." She said nothing. I looked toward the hallway, the one that led to my old room. I didn't want to see what they had turned it into. I didn't need another metaphor. Instead, I found myself drawn to the bookshelf. On the bottom shelf was an old photo album. I pulled it out, flipped through the pages slowly. Graduation, vacations, Christmas. One page was missing. I didn't ask. I closed the album, set it back, and looked at my mother one last time. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "I'm just done." And then I left. That night, after a hot shower and a simple dinner of soup and toast, I sat on my bed in pajamas, combing through my mail. One envelope stood out. Certified, hand-delivered. Inside was a single sheet. Notification of withdrawal. Valora Gray has been officially removed from the Wellness Collective LLC ownership structure. Attached was a sticky note. "You win. Hope it was worth it." I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it into the drawer with the rest of my paperwork. I didn't feel victorious, just finally untouched. I slid the note back into the envelope, folded it twice over, and dropped it into the drawer beside my bed without locking it. There was no ceremony to it, no mental victory lap, just a quiet click as the drawer closed. The snow had begun falling sometime around midday, soft at first, now steady, filling the silence outside with a rhythm I hadn't realized I missed. It was Christmas Eve, my first one completely alone. Not alone like ignored, not alone like exiled, just alone, on purpose. I had spent the day slowly, intentionally. Wrapped the small gifts I bought myself, a new kettle, a cozy pair of socks, a book I'd loved as a teenager but never owned. I didn't write to Aelith on any of them. They didn't need tags. They were mine. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and orange peel. I'd simmered both in water on the stove because that's what my dad used to do when he wanted the house to feel like the holidays. Delora said it made the air sticky, but I liked it. It smelled like warmth you could trust. In the corner of the living room sat a tiny fake tree, tabletop size, nothing fancy. I'd found it at a thrift store for $5. It leaned slightly to the left, no matter how many times I adjusted the base, but it didn't bother me. I had decorated it that morning with a few felt ornaments and one brass star I'd bought online. Not the one I made with my dad years ago, the one that vanished when my mother donated my old boxes. But this new one, it didn't carry the same memories. And maybe that was the point. It wasn't tied to what had been taken. It was something I chose. Around 6, I made dinner. Roasted chicken thighs with rosemary and lemon, mashed potatoes and green beans. Simple, enough for one. I set the table with care. Plate, fork, napkin, water glass, wine glass, even though I hadn't poured any wine. Then I set a second place across from mine, an empty chair. I didn't speak, didn't toast, just paused. Let the silence stretch wide and soft, like a blanket being laid across everything that had come before. After dinner, I washed the dishes by hand. I didn't rush. I let the hot water run over my fingers longer than necessary, soaking in the weight of the stillness. No chaos, no expectations, no tiptoeing around someone else's mood. When I was done, I poured myself a mug of cider and curled into the couch. Fireplace app flickering on the TV. A soft jazz playlist humming low in the background. I picked up the small wooden box I kept on the bookshelf and brought it to my lap. Inside was the letter. My father's handwriting was unmistakable. Bold, careful, almost too formal for a man who used to doodle cartoons on napkins. "For when you feel like you don't belong," the envelope read. I unfolded it slowly, the paper already worn soft from too many rereads. Tonight, though, I read it aloud. For me, if you're reading this, it means the world tried to make you smaller. Don't let it. The house is in your name because I knew who would protect it. Even if they forget your worth, don't you dare. I wiped a tear before it could slide past my cheek, not because I was broken, but because I wasn't, not anymore. The knock on the door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it to find Robert, my neighbor from down the hall. Elderly, quiet, kind. Always waved when we passed in the hallway. He held a tin wrapped in red foil. "I made too many snickerdoodles," he said. "Thought maybe you could help with that." I smiled. "I definitely can." I invited him in. We sat on the couch, sipped cider, Ate cookies that were far better than any I'd ever made. We talked about nothing and everything, weather, favorite holiday movies, how both of us had no intention of setting foot in a crowded store ever again. No drama, no manipulation, just two people keeping each other company. Before he left, he placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "Merry Christmas, Aelith. Don't let the quiet fool you. Sometimes it's exactly what's needed." After he left, I opened my journal. I didn't write much, just one small truth. I won't ever be in their family photo again, but I no longer need to be. I know who I am, and what I kept alive, me. I closed the book, turned off the fireplace app, and stood to turn off the tree lights. But then I stopped. I looked back at the table, at the extra plate, and instead of putting it away, I walked over and straightened the napkin. No one was coming to sit in that chair, and that was okay, because it wasn't empty. It was full of memory, of dignity, of choices that finally belonged to me. Outside, the snow kept falling, not heavy, just steady. Sometimes the hardest part isn't leaving a toxic family dynamic, it's realizing you were never truly included to begin with. This story isn't just about money or holidays. It's about boundaries, identity, and the silent strength it takes to stop explaining yourself. Have you ever been the one holding everything together until the day you chose to let go? If this story resonated with you, drop a comment and share your experience. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that hit where it hurts and heal where it matters.